Hi everybody, I'm KHOU 11 meteorologist Pat Calvin coming to you from Houston, Texas with the latest on Tropical Storm Ian. This is for Saturday evening, September 24th, 2022. So there's our storm right now just to the south of Jamaica here in the middle of the Caribbean. Winds sustained at 45 miles per hour, still moving to the west. So we don't have that northward movement yet, moving to the west at about 15 miles per hour. And the storm not looking super healthy at the moment, but there are a few features here that I want to point out to you on the latest satellite imagery. One, we've got a big core of thunderstorms right around the center of the system. So that's a good sign for strengthening. You want all those thunderstorms consolidated around the center. Another feature that's interesting is we start to see this venting now on the upper levels, and you can see it better during the day with visible satellite. Obviously, now that the sun's down, we don't have visible, so we're using infrared satellite. But with this satellite picture, you get the sense that we're getting these kind of arms extending out from the center of the storm. That is a sign of outflow, which is a sign that the storm, again, is in a healthy environment for strengthening. So a lot of things going for this storm as we get into the overnight hours, and we're expecting some big changes as we get into the day tomorrow. So here's the latest forecast from the National Hurricane Center. A few things that I want to point out to you. Again, it's a 45 mile per hour storm as of Saturday evening. By the time we get to Monday afternoon, it's a 110 mile per hour Category 2 hurricane. It's a huge jump in wind speed in a very short period of time. So we're expecting some rapid intensification potentially as we go through the next 24 to 36 hours. And then by Monday night into Tuesday morning, as this thing approaches the Yucatan Channel in between the Yucatan Peninsula and the west coast of Cuba, this thing could be a major Category 3 hurricane with winds sustained at 125 miles per hour. Where does it go from there? A lot of questions still remain. We've got a really wide envelope of possibilities. Anywhere from southwest Florida here towards the Naples area, cutting across towards West Palm Beach and eventually up into the Orlando area, all the way across the panhandle of the state towards Pensacola. So a huge range of possibilities here. Don't just focus on the center. This just represents the mean of all the different paths that this thing could take based on this forecast. But it could go, the center of the storm can go anywhere within this cone. So anywhere from the eastern edge here, right through the center, and also up towards the western edge. So you really do have to look at the entire cone, the entire picture, when we're talking about these hurricane forecasts. But look at the intensity here. And this intensity is also going to be dependent upon how much interaction we see with land as it passes by the west end of Cuba. It stays over the Yucatan Channel. This thing could easily make a run at Category 5 hurricane status as it enters the Gulf of Mexico. Obviously, that is going to be the worst case scenario. And then from there, we really have to figure out where this thing is going. But I would say that anyone here, pretty much from New Orleans all the way down through Florida, needs to be watching this very carefully here as we go through the next few days. So hurricane warning, tropical storm watch is in effect here for the Cayman Islands. Nothing yet for Cuba as of the 7 p.m. advisory. I expect that to change either later tonight or as we get into tomorrow morning. Rainfall is going to be a big story. You know, despite the fact that we're going to see a big wind maker here for the western half of Cuba, I mean, flash flooding, mudslides, huge concern here. Again, from Havana all the way points towards the west. Notice, though, even as this storm makes a close brush with the Yucatan Peninsula, look at how fast the rain totals drop off here. We go from a foot in terms of rain totals to maybe an inch at best towards Cancun. And the reason for that is because the worst side of the storm is always to the east of the center of circulation. So from the Cayman Islands, even parts of Jamaica could see flash flooding in a few spots, especially on the south end of the island. But from Jamaica up to the Cayman Islands and especially into the western half of Cuba, we're expecting the potential for flash flooding and mudslides, regardless of the exact track that this storm takes. So why is there so much uncertainty? And you may have been hearing about this. We don't exactly know where the storm goes. The track has shifted to the west. What's going on? There's a few key players. We're going to start off with the model plots because this is what we use to make our official forecast. National Hurricane Center takes all of the computer simulations that are out there. They run all these different types of variations on models to get a consensus as to where exactly a storm may go, right? So they don't just look at one, they don't look at two, they look at a huge suite of models. And then from there, they actually make the forecast based on what they've seen historically in the past. So Friday evening, this is what the model plots were looking like. Generally favoring the eastern half of the Gulf of Mexico, the west coast of Florida, specifically the Tampa Bay area, all the way down towards southwest Florida, with the potential to see this going into the Big Bend coast. That was the consensus yesterday evening. 24 hours later, so we'll draw this line just to show you where the consensus was Friday evening. This is where we are now. So 24 hours later, we've had a huge jog to the west, and that's why there's still a lot of uncertainty as to exactly where this system goes. In fact, parts of South Florida are now out of the official forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center, and the Hurricane Center's forecast cones always lag a little bit behind these changes because the Hurricane Center isn't going to just change at the drop of a dime because models change from run to run. So what they need to do is they actually have to look for trends, right? They got to go 6-12 hours, see how the models trend. If this is just one blip on the radar, right, the models just go west for one run and then they end up going back east, they're not going to change the forecast that much. But if run after run after run, they start to see these models continuing to drift west, that forecast will follow. And we saw that this afternoon. The Hurricane Center nudged it a little farther west. I suspect at 10 o'clock Central Time tonight, we're going to see it even farther to the west just because that's been the trend on the models pretty much all day long. So what is driving the direction that Ian goes in? We've got 3 players on the map. We've got an area of high pressure over the 4 corners. We've got another high here. That's just to the south of Bermuda. And then this dashed line, that indicates a surface trough. And typically surface troughs are associated with cold fronts. And these areas of lower pressure in the atmosphere can help suck in other areas of low pressure like hurricanes. And that's the placement of where all 3 of these features will be as we get into Tuesday. So pay attention to the timing. Timing is really important here. We'll talk about the highs first and the roles that these will play on the storm. This high is going to try to push Ian to the east. This high is going to try to push in towards the west. So you get that squeeze play here where the storm can go anywhere in between the influence of those highs. That's really the big steering current here. The other player that comes into the equation is this trough. That trough is going to be really a game changer here as we get into the middle part of the week. And the reason why is some computer simulations have it a little farther to the north. And if that's the case, it's going to leave Ian in this regime in the Gulf of Mexico where there aren't many factors that are going to push it or steer it. Whereas if it's far enough south, this thing's going to get sucked right up into that trough along the cold front and pulled to the north. So again, a lot of moving pieces here. And we're still about 4 or 5 days away from getting to this point. So until then, you're going to see changes in the forecast. That's why it's really important that everyone stays on top of this. So let's talk near term. This is one of our high resolution in-house computer models. And again, as we get into tomorrow morning, it's still in the middle of the Caribbean. So here's Jamaica out here. Here are the Cayman Islands. Here's Central America here. So we're not talking about any land interaction for tomorrow. But we are starting to see a little more organization. Notice the outer rain bands here, extending all the way out towards Jamaica. West side, you're okay. Cayman Islands, you'll probably start to see some of the rain as we get into Sunday evening as the storm starts to expand and it starts to become a lot more organized. Sunday night into Monday, what a difference in structure, at least on radar. You know, we've got really well-defined rain bands extending into the Cayman Islands and all the way north into the southwestern part of Cuba. We've got a well-defined eye. And that is where we expect that rapid intensification to really take off. We go from a Category 1 hurricane at that point to a Category 3 storm. And on this particular model run, again, take this with a grain of salt. This is just one of many. This actually takes it right over Cuba. But here's the official forecast track from the National Hurricane Center. So it's a little to the west of this one particular computer model. Bottom line though, what this illustrates, a really well-defined and compact hurricane. Outer rain bands expanding all the way down towards the Cayman Islands, and you get that really well-defined and healthy-looking eye wall. So regardless of where the storm is, by Tuesday morning, it's going to be a very healthy-looking storm. And then by that point, we're going to have a really good idea of where it's going. But right now, the jury is still out. So here's 2 of our longer-range computer models. So what I just showed you was that short-range computer model. That gives us the forecast out to about 60 hours. These are the 2 big ones that we use. The American in yellow, the Euro in red. You can see they're pretty much on top of each other in agreement as we get into tomorrow. Watch what happens though as we get into Tuesday. That's where things start to diverge. And we just saw this on that high resolution model where it took it over the west coast of Cuba. That's kind of in line here with the European simulation. The American model though keeps it over the Yucatan Channel. Doesn't seem like a big difference, but this is going to have big implications down the road in terms of, does it continue towards the north and east into Florida, or does it go north towards the Panhandle, or maybe even points farther to the west of that? Because depending on exactly where it is, will ultimately determine where it interacts with that surface trough, with that cold front that's coming in. The good news, though, is that they're pretty good in agreement when it comes to timing. So we are talking about by Tuesday, this thing is starting to emerge into the southern Gulf of Mexico. And then from there, what happens? And again, this is not meant to scare you. This is the working forecast right now using these computer models. American, again, continuing that northward track towards the Panhandle. The Euro continues that northeastward track towards southwest Florida, anywhere from Fort Myers, Naples, and the Tampa Bay area, somewhere in that envelope, all the way across pretty much along the I-4 corridor towards Orlando and the Space Coast. And then from there, you know, it's anyone's guess. But this is by Wednesday. So Wednesday, Thursday, we could start to see the impacts, the first impacts across the United States, whether it's the Florida Peninsula, the Florida Panhandle, or even, again, don't let your guard down, as far west as New Orleans, just based on what we're seeing with these trends. Again, the trends don't go that far west right now, but if they continue, that could be in play here as we get into the middle part of the week. So here's more of a breakdown. Again, American computer model. This is for Wednesday, September 28th. The American model still has this thing over the Gulf of Mexico, over open water. Big impact still, though, to Florida because it's on the dirty side of the storm there, on the east side of the storm. European model, potential landfall, either Wednesday night or Thursday. Again, you want to go with the official forecast of the National Hurricane Center because these simulations change every few hours. The Hurricane Center folks, they take these forecasts, they sit down, they look at them, and they say what has been historically more accurate, which model is handling the storm better. They look at a whole slew of data and information, and that's how you get the working forecast. So you want to stay on top of this because it is going to be changing here as we go through the next few days. So with that in mind, I know this might sound silly, but pretty much everyone in the yellow and red here needs to keep a very close eye on this forecast, at least for the next, I would say, 24 to 48 hours. And then you're going to notice this. This map is really going to tighten up as we get into tomorrow evening and then more so as we get into Monday. Once the storm starts to organize better, the models will have a better idea of where it's going. Okay, the models need a really well-defined area of circulation to pinpoint where a storm's going to go. Because think about it. If the data that the model gets to produce a forecast is bad, the forecast is going to be bad. So the better the information that goes into the model, the better the information that comes out of the model. And right now we don't have a great center, a great defined center of circulation with this storm. That will be different as we get into tomorrow. We're going to have a better idea, I think, more confidence going into Sunday night and Monday. But until then, definitely West Coast Cuba. Key West, the Florida Keys, definitely want to watch this. And then really anywhere from the Everglades going up towards the Big Bend coast of Florida, we are expecting some sort of significant impacts because, again, even if this storm stays on that westernmost track over the Gulf of Mexico, you are on the dirty side of the storm. So we're talking about wind, surge, a huge concern. West coast of Florida, very susceptible to storm surge because of how far out the continental shelf extends under the water. Basically, the water is really shallow, about a couple hundred miles offshore, and basically what that does is it allows the water to pile up and it pushes inland a little farther. So storm surge is a big concern for the west coast of Florida, regardless of where this thing makes landfall, and rain and maybe even the chance for a few isolated tornadoes, big concern. So more impact likely for Florida, especially west coast Florida, but the direct landfall location, anyone's guess. So you want to monitor the forecast everywhere from, here in Houston, Texas, through New Orleans, all the way down to Florida here as we get into the next few days. So that's a lot of information, but that's the latest on Tropical Storm Ian as of this Saturday. New information coming out probably about every 12 hours on this YouTube channel. We are constantly updating. We are constantly bringing you the latest analysis and information. So please follow along for the latest. You can also follow us here on social media, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.